Okay, so I get asked this all the time about supplements and do I need them? What ones do I need? And so I kind of wanted to kind of go over kind of a kind of high level kind of discussion about supplements. There's thousands of different supplements, and for the most part, we really try to avoid using supplements, but there are supplements we find that often people are needing. So I want to just kind of go over and highlight some very common ones. Again, this isn't meant to be all inclusive because, like I said, there's thousands of them, but this is what I kind of call kind of foundational, in that we see a lot of deficiencies in this. So let's dive right in. So first, why supplements? Well, the biggest issue is what we call dietary gaps, and what that means is either we're not eating the right foods, but probably what we're seeing more now is the foods that we are eating are nutrient deficient, meaning that a lot of times the soil's been depleted, and so the nutrient density has been changed by our practices, and so we're finding that a good breadth of food necessarily isn't giving you all the supplements you need. And then obviously we're all in different stages of life, and depending on where you're at in life also can impact if you need some supplementations. And then another big one is we have so much digestive issues with our current society that it really is impacting how our body is absorbing these nutrients that are very really essential in our overall health. And so we may suffer from digestive problems because of how we eat, but also we may be on medications that really impact the absorption or the body's ability to use these supplements. And then, the obvious ones, lifestyle factors, if we're on a specific diet, like a vegan or plant-based diet versus a carnivore diet, that's going to impact what you need, also related to supplements. So again, this is kind of high level here, kind of common supplements that I want to talk about. So first thing I'm going to talk about is some minerals that we need. Then I'm going to talk about calcium, magnesium, iron, zinc, potassium, selenium, iodine, and copper. And we'll talk about each one of these individually. So calcium, well, calcium is really, really important. It really is helps us build and maintain strong bones and teeth. That's where people really associate calcium. But it also is extremely important in muscle contraction and also nerve signaling and blood clotting. So if people are deficient in this, you're going to see muscle cramps, brittle nails, bone fractures, osteoporosis. Now, the foods obviously that we can eat are dairy products, leafy greens like your kale. Um, in our society, a lot of our milks is fortified, and then things like sardines is also very rich in calcium. The challenge with calcium is it's kind of an outlier that you really have to pay attention if you're supplementing it because it impacts so many other things. And so typically if you're taking a calcium supplement, you often are encouraged to take it kind of alone, if you would, because it has great impact on the body's absorption of really everything else. And so you may be on some medication. Often they'll tell you not to take calcium with the medication or other supplements because it impacts the body's ability to absorb other nutrients and things like that. And then there's different types of forms of it. The citrate form is usually the one that's recommended just because it's absorbed much better. The body's able to take that in better. So that's kind of calcium. Now, magnesium is something you don't very often hear about, but it's extremely important. It's actually involved in over 300 biochemical reactions in our body. So it's instrumental in energy production, muscle function, nerve conduction, your heart rhythm. And so deficiency in that is going to be fatigue, muscle spasm. You can have anxiety. A lot of kind of mental illness can be attributed to magnesium deficiency. You can have irregular heartbeats and also migraines. So sources for it is like your nuts, your seeds, your whole grains, legumes, actually dark chocolate. Now again, dark chocolate, not just milk chocolate, but your dark chocolates. And then spinach. And then again, there's different types of magnesium supplements. that are all kind of different on how your body responds, specifically GI upset. So if you depending on the type of, whether it's a citrate or glycinate, can impact how your body digests it, but also may have some symptoms. So if you need to do magnesium supplementation, you may have to try different types of forms of magnesium. And then high doses is going to cause diarrhea. So it's something we do need to pay attention. But magnesium is one that pretty much throughout our society, people are deficient in. Then iron, iron is really important because that's what makes hemoglobin and that's what carries the oxygen in our red blood cells. So obviously a deficiency in iron is going to have fatigue, pale skin, shortness of breath, you're going to have thinning of hair, you may have cold hands and feet. Now, iron really, is one of those things that people attribute to just only can get iron through meat, and that's not true. Red meat and poultry is very important in getting iron, but you can get it in lentils, beans, and then a lot of our cereals in the United States are fortified with iron. And then spinach is also a good source of iron. Now, this is also one that we caution with the vitamin C, meaning that vitamin C helps us absorb iron better, and so we want to make sure we're taking vitamin C with iron. That's going to make our body absorb it. And then the flip side is the calcium. Calcium is going to really compete for the absorption. So we want to make sure you're not taking calcium at the same time. But again, if you're eating a well-balanced, whole food, non-processed kind of diet, supplementation is pretty rarely needed. And I'll talk about a couple that even in that venue still is needed, but iron is something that's essential for our function. And then zinc. Now, zinc, it's important in supporting our immune function. It also is essential in wound healing and then DNA synthesis and our taste perception, actually. So, if you're deficient, you're going to find you're frequently having infections. You may have poor wound healing, hair loss, loss of taste or smell. Now, zinc sources is meat, your shellfish, your legumes, and then some seeds and nuts, and then dairy. Um, Now, supplementation is also one of those things we have to kind of pay attention to because it can also interfere with copper, not necessarily directly with the absorption, but it can lead to copper deficiency. So, understanding how a supplement can impact each other is really, really important. Now, potassium is also extremely important um, in making sure our body is functioning good. It's going to regulate our fluid balance. It's going to have an impact on muscle contractions, nerve signals, and it actually counters the sodium effect on our blood pressure. Deficiencies in this is going to see muscle weakness. You're going to have cramps, maybe heart palpitations and fatigue. Good sources of potassium is bananas, potatoes, beans, avocados, leafy greens, and squash. Now, potassium is one we usually don't encourage supplementation because it's one that if it gets high, it could actually be life-threatening. So this is one that if you're having to supplement, often they'll want to check your potassium levels periodically to make sure that you're not getting too high because it obviously is one of the rare supplements that can really cause a whole bunch of problems, including death if it's not managed appropriately. The next one is selenium. This is a powerful antioxidant, so it helps combat kind of things that the free radicals that can destroy the cells. It's going to support your thyroid function, and it really is instrumental in helping you in reduction of inflammation. So deficiencies in this is you're going to see fatigue, weakened immune, hair loss, thyroid dysfunction. Um, Good sources, Brazil nuts are very high in selenium. Seafood, eggs, sunflower seeds are all good sources. And this is one where we really don't need a lot of it. So it's often included in multivitamins because we only need trace amounts of it, but it is extremely important to have it within our system. And then iodine, this is critical for thyroid for production and metabolism and actually cognitive development. So deficiencies, often people that are deficient may have signs like a goiter. That's the big kind of mass in their neck. They're going to gain weight. They're going to have cold intolerance, and they may have some just mental sluggishness. Now, a lot of our food sources, our salt has been iodized, so it's added iodine. But then seaweed, dairy, and fish is also good sources of this supplement. But again, this is also one that we want to balance a little bit because too much iodine can really disrupt thyroid function. So again, we need it in our diet, but we need to be cautious of how much it is. And then copper. Now, copper is going to support red blood cell formation. It's going to help with iron metabolism and also our nervous system functions. So deficiencies, you're going to see fatigue, anemia, neurologic issues, weak bones. Good sources are shellfish, nuts, seeds, whole grains, and organ meats. So again, we can supplement this as needed, but often if we are eating a good diet, we don't need to supplement because also zinc is one we want to balance because excess zinc can also lower your copper levels. So again, supplements can impact other supplements and other medications and other functions in the body. So while they're essential, we have to kind of also be cautious on how much of that we're doing. So that's kind of the elements. Now I want to talk about the vitamins, and specifically we're going to talk about vitamin D, vitamin B12, folate, vitamin C, A, E, and K. So vitamin D. Now we've talked in the past quite a bit about vitamin D, and really there's kind of two different types of vitamin D. They call one D3 and then one D2, and that really is kind of the source. So D3 is an animal source, and D2 is a plant source. Now the function of vitamin D is going to really help us with calcium absorption. It's going to support our immune function, bone strength, and mood regulation. So deficiencies, you're going to see fatigue, frequent infections, bone pain, muscle weakness, and actually depression. You're going to find it in fatty fish, your yolks, and then obviously sunlight exposure is extremely important. Now, supplement-wise, D3 is usually the more effective because it's absorbed better. And then often it's paired with vitamin K2 because that's going to help aid in the calcium metabolism. So it helps us absorb calcium appropriately, but also it helps prevent the calcium buildup in our arterial walls. So it prevents that stiffness of our arteries. Again, this is one that we very seasonal, depending on where you live, because it is greatly impacted by sunlight exposure. Now, vitamin B12, it's vital for red blood cell production, also neurological function, and then DNA synthesis. So again, deficiencies, fatigue, disturbances, and then also something called megablastic anemia. So your meats, your fish, your eggs, your dairy is all great sources. This is one that's not found in in plants, and so this is an essential supplement for people that are on a plant-based diet. There's different forms of this that are more active on how your body digests them, but the important part is that this is one that often needs supplementation, specifically if you're on a plant-based diet. Now, your folate or vitamin B9, it's crucial really for DNA and RNA synthesis. It's also essential for red blood cell production and then fetal development. So signs of deficiency is going to be fatigue, irritability, poor growth, neural tube defects in infants. You can find it in your leafy greens, your legumes, citrus fruits, and actually liver too. And again, there's a synthetic type of this, obviously meaning that it's man-made. But again, it's absorbed better if we can get it in the natural form. But again, this is one that, especially in pregnancy, is often supplemented to make sure that they're preventing those neural tube defects or so they don't have any type of birth defect. Now, vitamin C, also known as ascorbic acid, it's an extremely strong antioxidant, support your immunity, and iron absorption, and wound healing. So a deficiency, you're going to see bleeding gums, poor wound healing, often frequent infections, and then scurvy is an extreme deficiency of vitamin C. Now, obviously, your food sources, everyone's aware, like citrus fruits, but you can get it in bell peppers, strawberries, broccoli, kiwi are all sources of vitamin C. And then again, there's different type of supplementations. Again, some of those just depends on how your body reacts on kind of some GI issues. So higher doses can cause loose stools. And so it's important if you're taking vitamin C, we often will spread that out. So not just a one-time dose, but multiple doses at smaller kind of milligrams, if you would. Then vitamin A, it's important, obviously, in support of our vision, but it's also extremely important in immune function, reproduction, and really cellular communication. So deficiencies is going to be night blindness, dry eyes and skin, and then frequent infections. Good sources of it is liver, egg yolks, butter, and then kind of your orange and green veggies. Now, there's an animal form and a plant form. So the retinol is an animal form versus beta carotene is the plant form of vitamin A. But again, it's just important that we get the vitamin, but it's also one that can be toxic. And so that's one that is smart to kind of regulate how much you're taking in vitamin A. But again, it's extremely important to have it. Otherwise, we have a lot of signs and symptoms of deficiencies. Your vitamin E is an antioxidant that protects cell membranes and really supports immune health. So deficiencies is going to be nerve and muscle damage. You're going to have vision problems and you have weak immunity. Great sources are your nuts, seeds, some vegetable oils, and then your green leafy vegetables. Again, there's different types of supplements, but the important thing to understand is that if you're supplementing it, that you also pay attention that it can also interfere with anticoagulations. If you're on an anticoagulant medicine, it has an impact on blood clotting. So that's something you'd have to be cautious of if you're taking any of those kind of medicine. Then right behind it is vitamin K. So it's also important for blood clotting and bone metabolism. So if you have a deficiency, you're going to find you bruise easily, you bleed a lot, and you have poor bone health. And again, so good sources is leafy greens, and then fermented foods, and then some animal products also contain good sources of vitamin K. There's different kinds. There's K1 and K2. Those are really just distinguishes as a plant source versus an animal source. They have found that the K2 form or the animal form is really the best for bone and cardiovascular health. And often you'll see, like I said already, that vitamin K is paired with vitamin D because they have this synergistic effect on working well together. So that's vitamin K. So kind of my summary is many people, they don't need supplements if they eat well balanced meals. I think that's important to first really hammer home. If you're eating well balanced meals, supplementation is something that you probably need very few things supplement, as long as it's good nutrient dense food. Now, there are obviously the factors that do increase the need for supplements. So if you have limited sun exposure, if you're on a vegetarian or a plant-based diet, or if you have digestive issues, or depending on that, where you're at in life, pregnancy versus older, we may need to supplement different things. And then medications is a big one. A lot of medications we're on interfere with our body's ability to absorb these things. So you're like the reflux medicines, the GERD medicines, the PPIs, those have a great impact on these things. And so it's real important to know there's in general, we want to minimize the amount of supplementation we do, but there are times that we need it, and that's impacted very individualized. So it goes back to kind of when we talk about, there's not a cookie cutter method that we can just say this applies to everyone. But this is just kind of the core high level supplements that are very common supplements that we need to often provide some type of supplement. So these are things that we can do blood tests on to evaluate, where you're at with supplements. And then another thing is not all supplements are created equally. You want to make sure you're you're choosing high quality forms that your body's actually able to absorb. And a lot of the off-brand or the cheaper supplements, they don't fall in that category. And in fact, we often jokingly call these bedpan bullets, because often you'll see patients that are on supplements, they're passing those tablets through their digestive system, and still you're finding them in their stool completely undigested. So quality of supplements becomes very important. And then also verification that it actually has in it what it says. So third-party verification that when it says this is what the supplement is, that someone's actually verified it. And then, one trend that we see is often people think if a little's good, a lot's better, and that's not the case. With supplements, we want to really avoid mega doses, because that can cause a lot of problem. And in fact, like I said, some of these can be fatal if you take too much of them. So really, avoiding the mega doses. And then remembering that supplements are really there to help support, not replace a healthy diet. And really, we should strive to maximize our diet so that we are getting what we need through a good, healthy diet and not relying heavily on supplements. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing.